covered a lot of ground already, and we're about to embark on 370 years of history. And so I pray that you would help this sermon to do what you intend for it to do. You tell us in your word that your word does not return void. And so I pray, Father, that even though there are going to be a lot of dates and a lot of names, that we would not miss the primary focus that you are well in charge, that you are sovereign, that you are providentially working out your plan the way you see fit. And Lord, so we can trust you, and we just praise you for that. So help us to be faithful because you are faithful. And it's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Well, in 1975, Pol Pot, and perhaps some of you remember, came to power in Cambodia, and in just 4 years, his regime killed an estimated 2 million people, nearly 1/4 of the population. He emptied the cities, he banned religion, he shut down schools, he executed intellectuals, and anyone caught with a Bible or even praying was tortured and killed. Families were torn apart. Children were brainwashed to report their own parents. Faith communities were crushed. One survivor said this, you didn't just fear dying, you feared living, because every moment was ruled by someone who hated everything you loved. Can you imagine trying to hold on to faith in a world like that? In a world where darkness doesn't just feel close, it's like darkness is winning. That's the emotional weight that Daniel felt when he saw the vision in chapter 11 of Daniel. A vision of rulers so cruel, so godless, so relentless, so diabolical that he was sick for days. God was not out of control, even though it might have felt like it at the time. He was pulling back the curtain to show Daniel what in fact was coming. Evil would rise, persecution would come, but through it all, God would remain faithful, and so would his true people. Daniel was given a vision. He was given a vision so detailed, so precise, that secular critics claim it must have been written after the events that took place. Well, of course, we know that's not true. We recognize the vision came from a God who is outside of time and has no problem telling us the future because he's in the future. God showed Daniel what was to come. Political turmoil, tyrannical rulers, and terrifying persecution. And we can empathize with Daniel of why he was broken for days dealing with this vision that he saw from God. But in the midst of it all, God's sovereign hand remains unshaken. God's sovereign hand remains unshaken. God is not in heaven wringing his hands going, oh my goodness, look at what's going on. That's not our God. And that really leads to the main idea that we have this morning. God's people will be faithful because God is faithful. God's people will end up being faithful because God himself is faithful. And even when the most corrupt leaders rise to power, God's faithfulness remains our anchor. How do we thrive spiritually? And that's really the whole point of this series in Daniel, is thriving spiritually in the midst of opposition. How do we thrive spiritually when leaders are evil and the world seems to be in chaos? Well, for Daniel, this isn't just random chaos, but God is revealing future history. For Daniel, he gets a glimpse of what is to come. And it shows us that no matter how diabolical leadership becomes, God remains faithful and his people remain faithful to him because they are imbued with the Spirit of God. And that leads us to the first point, God's faithfulness in the rise and fall of nations. And we're going to work through verses 2 through 20. Again, there was a sheet out there. If you didn't get it, please grab it. It will summarize all of the names and dates that I'm going to go over with you this morning. But as we review Daniel chapter 11, 2 through 35, we're going to see the future for Daniel, but the past for us. This is called Daniel's near fulfillment, which focused on the leadership for Persia, the leadership for Greece, and then a specific focus on a man called Antiochus Epiphanes. Look at verse 2 of chapter 11. And now I will show you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings shall rise in Persia, and a 4th shall be far richer than all of them. And when he has become strong through his riches, he shall stir up all against the kingdom of Greece. So, who are the Persian kings? Well, first of all, we see Cyrus is one of those kings. We see that in Daniel chapter 10, verse 1. You can see in the 3rd year, Cyrus, the king of Persia. But then there are 3 more kings. Cambyses, he's in 530 to 522 BC. Pseudo-Smerdis, and then Darius Hystaspes. And you can see the dates up there as well. These are 3 kings that Daniel prophesied, or God shows Daniel in his vision. The 4th king may be familiar to you is Xerxes. Xerxes is also known as Ahasuerus, and Ahasuerus is found in the book of Esther. And so we see him there. And now his veiled invasion of Greece, which took place between 481 and 479 BC, began Persia's decline. Now remember, we've been walking through this through the book of Daniel, right? The ups and downs of leadership, the rising and falling of leaders. And we see even Greece has been represented in multiple ways throughout the book of Daniel. Greece is represented by the belly and thighs of bronze in the statue. It's also been represented as a leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads. It's also been represented as a goat with a conspicuous horn that represents Greece and specifically Alexander the Great. But what do we see next? Look at verses 3 and 4. Then a mighty king shall arise who shall rule with great dominion and do as he wills. And as soon as he has arisen, the kingdom shall be broken and divided toward the 4 winds of the heavens, but not to his posterity, nor according to the authority with which he ruled, for his kingdom shall be plucked up and go to others besides these. So we see in verse 3 a mighty king. This mighty king is none other than Alexander the Great. Persia eventually fell to Alexander the Great in 331 BC. In verse 4, after Alexander's death in 323 BC, 4 generals, not his sons, divide the empires. Alexander's empire didn't pass to his sons because one of his sons was illegitimate, was not in line, and then the other was yet to be born. So, after his death, 4 generals took over. And Daniel says this, right? God says this to Daniel, not to his posterity, not to his children. So these 4 generals, Seleucus, Ptolemy, Lysimachus, and Cassander, divided the empire, weakening it and leaving Israel caught in the middle of a geopolitical tug of war. You're like, wow, this is so inspiring. Well, it is inspiring if you understand that there is a God behind all of this. Now there are wars between Egypt and Syria in verses 5 through 20. So the focus then shifts from Greece to the king of the south, Ptolemies of Egypt, and the king of the north, the Seleucids in Syria, both in relation to Palestine. So this following passage that we're going to cover right now covers almost 200 years of wars between these powers. I want you to look at the map that I have up on the screen here, and you can see, right, you can see the Seleucid Empire, and you can see the Ptolemaic Empire. Seleucid, and then right here is Jerusalem, right? Right here is the land of Israel. So there's a tug of war going on between those 2 lands. So let me give you just a simple way to picture what's happening. You have 2 superpowers, Egypt in the south and Syria in the north, wrestling for control, and Israel is stuck in the middle. These are the superpowers of that day, right? We would call America a superpower today. These are the superpowers of that day. And what we see in verses 5 and 6 is a political marriage. Look at verses 5 and 6. Then the king of the south shall be strong, But one of his princes shall be stronger than, and he shall rule, and his authority shall be a great authority. After some years they shall make an alliance, and the daughter of the king of the south shall come to the king of the north and make an agreement. But she shall not retain the strength of her arm, and he and his arm shall not endure, but she shall be given up, and her attendants, he who fathered her, and he who supported her in those times. So, okay, what is going on in these verses? What does this mean? It's hard to do your devotions in these kind of verses, isn't it? Well, let's just peel it back and see what historically happened and how it coincides perfectly with history. After Alexander's empire fractured, two of the resulting powers dominated the section of this prophecy: the Ptolemies, the south in Egypt, and the Seleucids. Remember, those two of the four generals that took over for Alexander the Great. These verses describe both the growing tension and the failed attempt at peace between them. Isn't that funny that there's still problems with peace in the world today? It's been going on for a minute, hasn't it? Ptolemy II, Philadelphus, he was the king of the south. And he arranged a political marriage by sending his daughter Berenice to marry Antiochus II, and his last name is Theos, the Seleucid king. To seal the deal, Antiochus divorced his first wife, Laodice, but that betrayal actually came back to haunt him. After Ptolemy II died, Antiochus returned to Laodice, so he's crawling back to his wife, and in retaliation, you know what Shakespeare said? Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Right? Have you heard that before? Hell hath no fury. Well, check it out. She murdered Antiochus, Berenice, their infant son, and many of her attendants. She was not a happy camper. And Laodice then placed her own son, Seleucus II, on the throne. So the prophecy described the collapse of this alliance in chilling, profound accuracy. It says there that she shall be given up. Bernice's life and political hope are all snuffed out because of betrayal and bloodshed. So, for those of you that are frustrated and upset about the government today, can I just encourage you with this? Political intrigue is nothing new. It's been happening for a very long time. Look at Daniel chapter 11, verses 7 through 9. And from a branch from her roots one shall arise in his place, and he shall come against the army and enter the fortress of the king of the north, and he shall deal with them and shall prevail. He shall also carry off to Egypt their gods with their metal images and their precious vessels of silver and gold. And for some years he shall refrain from attacking the king of the north, and then the latter shall come into the realm of the king of the south, but shall return to his own land. So after Berenice's murder, her brother Ptolemy III, are you guys keeping track? Ptolemy III now is a branch from her roots, rose to power in Egypt and launched a successful revenge campaign against the Seleucid king, Seleucus the second, Callinicus. Okay, so here we have a revenge campaign that is taking place. He invaded Syria, he defeated the northern army, and he plundered their gods, images, and treasures. And this is a humiliation that we see in verse 8. Then he withdrew peacefully for several years, and then Seleucus II tried to retaliate, verse 9, but failed and returned in defeat. God, this is what's so amazing about this. God foretold these exact events, proving his sovereignty and over all of it, his sovereign control over kings and kingdoms. He is over all of it. Well, the intrigue continues. Look at verses 10 through 12. The sons of Seleucus, Antiochus III, or Antiochus the Great. This is not Antiochus Epiphanes. This is Antiochus Epiphanes. This is Antiochus III, right? And so look at 10 through 12. His sons shall wage war and assemble a multitude of great forces, which shall keep coming and overflow and pass through, and again shall carry the war as far as his fortress. Then the king of the south, moved with rage, shall come out and fight against the king of the north. And he shall raise a great multitude, but it shall be given into his hand. And when the multitude is taken away, his heart shall be exalted, and he shall cast down tens of thousands, but he shall not prevail. So the war intensifies here. The sons of Seleucus II, especially Antiochus III, or the Great, renews this northern aggression, amassing a massive army and advancing deep into the Egyptian territory. We see that in verse 10. In response to this, Ptolemy IV in Egypt launches a furious counterattack and defeats Antiochus III, temporarily halting his advance. You can see that in verse 11. But Ptolemy grows arrogant from his success. Though he slaughters tens of thousands, verse 12, his victory doesn't last, and Egypt fails to capitalize on its momentum. Are you catching up? There's going to be a quiz at the end of this. Guys, just understand this, and you can't possibly get all of this in this, but what you can get is this. God is in charge. Do you remember? This is a vision of what is to come. This hasn't happened yet, but as we look back, it happened to the minutest of detail. What does that tell you about our God? He knows what he's doing. He's the author of history. That ought to give you some comfort. That ought to give you some measure of hope. That we have a God that is intimately involved in these details, these finite details. He's intimately involved in them. And it's amazing how God works in history. God not only predicted these power swings, but reminds us that there is no earthly victory that is outside of God's purview. Antiochus III doesn't give up. Look at verses 13 through 16. Antiochus regroups and eventually controls Palestine. The text refers to it as the glorious land. Look at verses 13 through 16. For the king of the north shall again raise a multitude greater than the first, and after some years he shall come on with a great army and abundant supplies. In those times many shall rise against the king of the south, and the violent among your own people shall lift themselves up in order to fulfill the vision. But they shall fail. And then the king of the north shall come and throw up siege work and take a well-fortified city. And the forces of the south shall not stand, or even his best troops, for there shall be no strength to stand. But he who comes against him shall do as he wills, and none shall stand before him, and he shall stand in the glorious land, Israel, with destruction in his hand. So what does all this mean? Well, years later, Antiochus the third returns with a larger, well-supplied army, that's verse 13, and begins to reclaim his territory. There are internal rebellions that arise in Egypt, verse 14, and some violent Jews joining in hope to fulfill prophecy, right? They're jumping in there as well. But Antiochus besieges and captures Sidon, a fortified city where the Egyptian forces, including General Scopas, are defeated. You can see that in verse 15. The king of both the north, the king of the north becomes unstoppable. He's unstoppable. And Antiochus enters the glorious land, Israel, and brings devastation with him. And this is a sobering reminder for all of us as we look at even our own lives now. God allows evil to rise. We have to understand that. God is not out of control. He allows evil to rise for his good purposes. It's never without purpose, and it is never outside of his plan. Are you familiar with Romans chapter 8, verses 28 and 29? It's a beautiful passage, and we know that for those who love God, all things work together for good, for those who are called according to his purposes. For those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to do what? Be conformed to the image of Christ. He foreknew you, And his plan for you was to be conformed to the image of Christ. And did you know that sometimes he uses evil and he uses bad, he uses tough things to conform you to the image of Christ? That doesn't just happen on an individual basis, that happens on a national basis as well. God is not out of control. Well, what comes next? Look at verse 17. He shall set his face to come with the strength of his whole kingdom, and he shall bring terms of an agreement and perform them. He shall give them the daughter of women to destroy the kingdom, but it shall not stand, nor be to his advantage. So Antiochus III, seeking to control Egypt through diplomacy, gives his daughter Cleopatra, not the famous one, there's another Cleopatra, Cleopatra I, gives his daughter Cleopatra in a marriage to Ptolemy V, hoping she will act as a political pawn and help him undermine the Egyptian kingdom. She is called the daughter of women. You see that? Likely emphasizing nobility and prominence. But his plan backfires. Cleopatra, she actually sides with her husband. Oops. Not with her father. And so his scheme, the text says, shall not stand nor be to his advantage, just as God foretold. Now look at verses 18 and 19. Afterwards, he shall turn his face to the coastland, and he shall capture many of them, but a commander shall put to an end his insolence. Indeed, he shall turn his insolence back upon him. Then he shall turn his face back toward the fortress of his own land, and they shall stumble and fall and shall not be found. So in verses 18 and 19, Antiochus tries to conquer Greece, but is defeated by Rome, and he dies while attempting to loot the temple. Look at verse 20. Then shall arise in his place one who shall send an exactor of tribute for the glory of the kingdom, but within a few days he shall be broken, neither in anger nor in battle. So Seleucus the fourth, Antiochus' son, after Antiochus III's military failure, his son Seleucus Philopator inherited a weakened empire and massive debt to Rome. So he had to raise some money. And he sent tax collectors across the kingdom, including the glorious land, or Israel, which brought distress and resentment against him. Who likes a tax collector? Anybody here? You like tax collectors? Well, they didn't like him. So the phrase "to exact tribute" likely refers to his official treasurer, Heliodorus, who was tasked with squeezing money out of provinces, including the temple treasury in Jerusalem. Seleucus' reign was short, and he didn't die in battle, but he was mysteriously murdered, probably by the tax collector himself. All right, so his sudden and quiet death sets the stage for a rise of one of the most wicked rulers in history, Antiochus IV Epiphanes. Antiochus Epiphanes, who would usher in great suffering for God's people. All right, so folks, stick with me here. I know I told you it was going to be thick, all right? 200 years. We just covered 200 years of drama, murder, death, power, intrigue. 200 years. Was God out of control? Okay, I'm going to ask that again, and that's a really good place for you to wake up and say no. Okay, all right? 200 years of all of this intrigue, was God out of control? No, absolutely not. Everything was unfolding just like God had planned. Remember, this is a vision to Daniel of something that is yet to come, and as we look back, it came true to the minutia, okay? So I think that's amazing. Each king, each war, each alliance plays a role in God's unfolding plan. Don't ever forget this truth from Proverbs chapter 21, verse 1. The king's heart is a stream of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it whichever way he will. Our God is in charge. Only a sovereign God could orchestrate centuries of global history with this kind of precision. What we hold in our hands, what you have in your lap, what we are reading on the screen is not just a history book, although it is an amazing history book. It is the living book. It is the words of life. I want you to imagine in your mind a symphony where every music. Have you been to? I like to go to, like this time of year. You hear the Marine band and they play da, 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 and it's just it's right there, right? It sounds good. Have you ever been to a symphony where you're like not quite sure what's going on musically? Like all these weird things are happening and it sounds kind of terrible. Have you ever experienced that? Yeah. Okay. And you're beginning to think, are they just messing around or what? Right? But there is a conductor. There is a conductor who even though it may sound like chaos to you, horns here and violins there and drums pounding in the back, at the center of it all is a conductor. And he sees the whole score. He knows where to bring in each section, when to build tension, and when to resolve it. That's what Daniel 11 shows us. From our finite point of view, it might look like world history is spiraling out of control, but God holds the baton. Every rise, every fall, every war, every alliance, every kingdom and king is following God's sovereign plan, whether they realize it or not. When the national headlines shake you, remember this chapter. God is never in a panic room. He is not retreating. God never retreats. He's not running in fear. That is not our God. His faithfulness spans generations, and his faithfulness spans governments. What does that mean for you? You can trust him. Even when you don't understand what is happening in Washington or in the world, God is not confused. He's not. When you're afraid of the future, and I've talked to some of you, and some of you are afraid of the future. You need not to be, Christian. You need not to be afraid of the future. Recite this verse. Psalm 56, verses 3 and 4. When I am afraid, I will put my trust in you. In God's whose word I praise. In God I trust. I shall not be afraid. What can flesh do to me? And the answer is nothing. Nothing happens to you that does not first pass through the providential hand of God. That ought to encourage you today. Will you do this? Will you do this? Will you remember this verse? When I am afraid, I will trust in you. If you do, it'll change your spiritual life. It will. Nations rise, nations fall, but God remains faithful. And because God is faithful over the nations, he is faithful to his people. And we've seen God's faithfulness in world affairs. But now let's look at how this affects people directly. What happens when that faithfulness is tested by direct opposition? That leads to point number 2. God's people will face opposition. Do you realize that? God's people will face opposition. What we see here in verses 21 through 31 is the rise of Antiochus IV Epiphanes, a man of flattery, a man of fury, and a man of desecration. So there's several points I want to make here. Number 1, he gains power by deception. Look at verse 21. Again, this hasn't taken place yet from Daniel's perspective, but we look back and we can see it clearly. In his place shall arise a contemptible person, to whom royal majesty has not been given. He shall come in without warning and obtain the kingdom by flattery. So Antiochus IV wasn't the rightful heir. The throne belonged to his nephew, Demetrius I, who was imprisoned in Rome. But Antiochus took advantage of this situation. He bribed powerful allies and seized the throne through deceit and manipulation. That's what he did. Though he styled himself, or he called himself Epiphanes, meaning God manifest. That's kind of arrogant, isn't it? You can call me God manifest, right? That's weird, but that's what he did. Many mockingly called him Epimanes, which is the madman, right? Here's a coin that's up on the screen. This coin, actually, Chuck Hartman has this coin, and I don't know where Chuck is, and he probably won't give it to you. But this coin, I took a picture of it, and he sent me this picture. This coin is 2,200 years old, and this is a coin that has Antiochus Epiphanes on it, right? This was a coin that he had minted for himself. So if you want to see it up close, you can talk to Chuck, and it's pretty amazing, right? That he makes a coin that says, God manifest. Do you think he had a bit of a pride problem? Probably, okay? Well, he crushes opposition. The second thing I want you to see is he crushes opposition and he targets the priesthood. Look at verse 22. Armies shall be utterly swept away before him and broken, even the prince of the covenant. Antiochus proved to be a powerful military force, but he also turned against God's people. He had Onias III, the high priest of Israel, likely called the prince of the covenant, murdered. That's who we're talking about here in the text. He had him murdered. This marked the beginning of his direct assault on Israel's worship. So he not only crushes his opposition, but he pretends to help out. But while he's doing that, he plots for power. Look at verses 23 and 24. And from the time that an alliance is made with him, he shall act deceitfully, and he shall become strong with small people or insignificant people. There's kind of a Robin Hood thing in here, if you noticed as I read this. Without warning, he shall come into the richest parts of the province, and he shall do what neither his fathers nor his fathers' fathers have done, scattering among them plunder, spoil, and goods. He shall devise a plan against strongholds, but only for a time. Do you see what he's doing here? He's robbing from the rich, and he's giving to the poor, to ingratiate the poor to be on his side. So Antiochus made a deceitful alliance with Ptolemy V of Egypt, and to help him reclaim his throne, but it wasn't genuine support. It was a tactical move. So with only a small force, Antiochus gained territory and power, even, as I mentioned, distributing money to win loyalty. You can read about that in Maccabees 3:30, 1 Maccabees 3:30. All right, he lied. By the way, Maccabees, don't recognize that as scripture, but it is historical, and it's helpful, okay? So look at verses 25 through 27. And he shall stir up, because he lies at the table while the nations bleed here, he shall stir up his power and his heart against the king of the south with a great army. And the king of the south shall wage war with an exceedingly great army and mighty army, but he shall not stand, for plots shall be devised against him. Even those who eat his food shall break him. His armies shall be swept away, and many shall fall down. And as for the two kings, their hearts shall be bent on doing evil. They shall speak lies at the same time, but to no avail, for the end is yet to be at the time appointed. All right, so what's happening here? Antiochus launches a campaign against Egypt, fighting his own nephew. Ptolemy V was betrayed by his counselors and defeated. And the two kings then met to form an alliance. But this alliance was built on lies. Both sought their own advantage. Neither trusted each other. Does this sound like modern times? Neither trusted each other, right? But their cooperation failed, and Egypt remained divided between Ptolemy V and his brother Ptolemy VIII. All right, so then he returns home, and Jerusalem pays the price. So look at verse 28. And he shall return to his land with great wealth, but his heart shall be set against the holy covenant, and he shall work his will and return to his own land. This is where this point comes in, this idea of opposition against God's people. So far, we're just seeing between the north and the south, but now this comes into play with hurting God's people. On his way back from Egypt in 169 BC, Antiochus passes through Jerusalem and found unrest. How did he respond to it? He responded with brutal force. 80,000 Jews were killed. 40,000 Jews were taken prisoner. And 40,000 Jews were sold as slaves, and they plundered the temple, they desecrated sacred objects, and his rage was no longer just political, but now it was personal and spiritual. And then what happens? Well, Rome then embarrasses him, so he turns on God's people again. Look at verses 29 through 30. At the time appointed, he shall return and come into the south. But it shall not be this time as it was before, for ships of Kittim shall come against him, and he shall be afraid and withdraw and turn back and be enraged and take action against the Holy Covenant, or the Jewish people. He shall turn back and pay attention to those who forsake the Holy Covenant. So in 168 BC, Antiochus tried to conquer Egypt again. But this time Rome intervened, and the Roman commander Gaius Populus Linus met him outside of Alexandria, and he handed him a decree from the Roman Senate. And he famously drew a circle around him in the sand, around Antiochus Epiphanes, drew a circle around him and said, "You decide what you're going to do before you step outside of that circle." I mean, he was not messing around. Humiliated, Antiochus withdrew, but his fury found a new target, right? So Rome muscled him around a little bit, and he couldn't do anything about it. So then what does any bully do? Go find someone else to pick on. That's what he's doing here, right? And so he went to Jerusalem, and he sent Apollonius, his tax collector, who entered the city peacefully, but then slaughtered civilians and enslaved others. And this is where it comes to a culmination. He commits the abomination of desolation. How many of you have heard that phrase before, the abomination of desolation? That's what we're talking about here. Look at verse 31. Forces from him shall appear and profane the temple and fortress, and they shall set up the abomination that makes desolation. So on December 15th, 167, Antiochus commits his greatest offense. He stopped daily sacrifices. He erected an altar to Zeus on the Jewish altar, and he sacrificed a pig, unclean, unthinkable from a Jewish perspective. And he banned circumcision, scripture reading, festivals, and Sabbath worship. He shut them down. This was the abomination of desolation that 1 Maccabees 1:54 talks about, and it foreshadows the future desecration by the Antichrist that Jesus talks about in Matthew 24:15. Jesus refers to a future desolation, abomination of desolation. I just want you to picture in your mind, and by the way, we're only going to get through point 2 today, but I want you to picture in your mind once full of song, right? This temple that's once full of song, sacrifice, sacred light, now echoing with the silence of abandoned worship. Just picture this in your mind. A pig is on the altar. An idol to Zeus towers above the holy place. For faithful Jews, this was spiritual terrorism. I mean, this was as bad as it could get from them, from their standpoint. It was spiritual terrorism. But Daniel saw it coming. Remember, this is a vision of what is yet to come. And it did happen just as God told Daniel. Listen, folks, don't be shocked when God's people are ridiculed. Don't be shocked. Don't be shocked when God's people's rights are removed or when truth is exchanged for lies. The darkness isn't winning in those seasons. It may feel like it is, but it's not winning, right? It's just following the script that God has laid out. Opposition is certain. Persecution is painful. But faithfulness is possible in those times. The God who predicted persecution also provides power to endure persecution. You must remember, there are going to be difficult things to come for the church. Will you stand? Will you be strong in those times? Well, Pastor Mark, how can I be? How can I stand? How can I be strong? How can I be faithful? Because your God is faithful. Because your God is faithful, right? This world is not our home. We're just passing through, right? And we're going to deal with tough stuff in this life. But we have a God who has a plan that He will bring to fruition. Come back next week and we're going to finish this up, because I think it's very important for you to see how God will handle Antiochus Epiphanes. Father, thank you for this privilege that we have to come together today. I know this is a lot of information, but Lord, if nothing else, even if we just throw all of the history out the window, help us not to throw out the fact that you are sovereign over all of history, that you are working your plan out, that you're not in heaven wringing your hands wondering what in the world's going on. That you are working a plan that will be for our good and for your glory. You will make all things right in the end, and we can trust you. There will be kingdoms that rise. There will be kingdoms that fall. There will be evil that rises. There will be evil that is vanquished. Lord, all of these things have happened and will continue to happen until you say this word, enough. And we long for that day when you do. And it's in Jesus'